Welcome to AstroTwins Radio, your cosmic GPS for life, love, and everything written in the stars. We're Tali and Ophira Edut, the AstroTwins, here to decode the astrology of the moment and help you navigate your destiny like a pro. Well, this March is definitely not going out like a lamb. It's the week of March 24th to 30th, and probably one of the most planetarily, cosmically active weeks we've had all year and will have all year. This is one of the reasons why we've been saying that March is destined to be the most intense month of 2025. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the weekly astrological forecast here on AstroTwins Radio. Tali in Seattle.
And Ophi in New York, riding the waves of Mercury and Venus retrograde, gearing up for another eclipse. This one a solar eclipse, supermoon. We're going to talk about that. Venus getting ready to back into Pisces out of Aries on its retrograde journey. And the big one, Neptune moving into Aries this weekend for the first time since the 1860s. No big deal there.
But let's not also forget Mercury is also moving back into Pisces the same day as that solar eclipse, and Black Moon Lilith, the witch wound, the empowered, enraged woman, the point in the sky that rules our shadow, our void, is changing signs for the first time in 9 months and moving into Scorpio. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned this week. We have a lot to unpack here, and every single day of the week is loaded with intensity. I was feeling it, I gotta say, like the last couple days, I have just been in my feelings, going up and down. And honestly, the only thing that grounds me is getting out of the 3D world this time around. Interestingly enough, since Aries season started last week, you would think with a fire sign and the end of Pisces season, you would be more inclined to get in your body and wanting to get physical. But I felt more like that during Pisces season. And now I'm like, okay, I need to lean into spiritual resources because the 3D world is not serving. So I've been listening upon your recommendation again to Dolores Cannon's 3 Waves of Volunteers. And
it's so fascinating because it really talks about a time when Uranus was last in Gemini, which is going to happen for the first time since the 1940s, this July, that, supposedly a new set of souls, of spiritual volunteers incarnated. So we'll get to that in a little bit if there's time, because there's so much to cover. But really, it helped me personally. Like, I'm willing to be like, I'll look at any context at this point for the madness going on this planet. And that made a lot of sense, that human beings abused their power, the power of natural resources, nuclear power in the 1940s, and created such heavy karma that volunteer souls needed to come in to the planet to help balance that out.
Neptune, which rules our soul plane, the ethereal, as well as the subconscious. Dolores Cannon, we should back up and say, for those who haven't heard of her, is one of the earliest hypnotherapists of our time. She's no longer alive, but a contemporary hypnotherapist who did past life regressions with people under hypnosis. It kind of started by accident for her. Now Neptune, at the very end, at the 29th degree of Pisces this week, is bringing that real wave of spiritual seeking and questioning.
Cannon was an Aries, so I feel like Neptune, which rules hypnosis and the subconscious, moving into her sign, like we may be hearing a lot more about her work.
And also Aries being kind of new souls coming in. I think the 3 waves of volunteers, it talks about and I'm just in the beginning of it. I've loved reading other Dolores Cannon books, but this one she talks about new souls that have never been imprinted or come onto the earth plane before, coming in to support us with our survival, our transition. So I'm finding it incredibly healing to just take a look at things from that metaphysical perspective this week. Just because whenever questions of why human beings are behaving the way they are become overwhelming and big, I always have to zoom out. It's a sign and a reminder to zoom out of that focused, granular material world plane, because things like that often have a larger explanation to them.
Yeah, I've got to believe there's a larger explanation. And, we mentioned last week that we decided to start publishing some posts on Substack. So we'll put the link in the show notes. The first one is about Meghan Markle. The second one is about Neptune and Aries and the Civil War. Is this what a civil war looks like in 2025? Because Neptune was last in Aries during the 1860s, but we have two very interesting repeating transits that are happening. They're doubles. So Uranus this summer is moving into Gemini for the first time since the 1940s, but prior to that, it was in the 1860s, 1858 to 1865, which overlapped with Neptune and Aries last time, 1861 to 65. So literally, for the first time, not only is Neptune going to be in Aries, but Uranus is going to be in Gemini for only the second time since the 1860s at the same time. That happened over 150 years ago that they were in there at the same time. So,
and that's happening this summer.
That's happening this summer and into the 2030s. So very interesting. We see a lot of stuff happening in America: taxes, tariffs, rebel breakaway groups, divided nation happening. We also have, we are also going to have Saturn in Aries and Pluto in Aquarius at the same time, which was when the dollar bill and the U.S. Treasury, and not the dollar bill, but the U.S. dollar became the currency of the United States. The New York Stock Exchange was established and then found in that 1700s period, and then found its residence during the 1860s period. So we're also having a lot of money and currency and treasury, taxes kind of things repeat from the late 1700s and the 1860s in sync with planets moving into the same position. So we'll be watching that on the long scale, but I've been fascinated to go down that rabbit hole. And I actually got to go to the New York Stock Exchange this past week with the New York Stock Exchange and Bank of America and a couple other financial companies brought a group of women together to talk about women coming onto boards of companies and how much better statistically companies do and perform when women are on their boards. And they had a panel. So not my usual astrological fare, but I found it fascinating. And I thought a real preview of Neptune moving into Aries, a solar eclipse in Aries, Lilith and Scorpio, like women, and wealth, women and power, and just a new approach overall, regardless of gender identity, to power and money and finances. And Lord knows we're ready for that. So
and let's not forget that Mars has spent the first quarter of this year in Cancer. Mars, which is our fight, our motivation, our momentum. And it's still in Cancer until April 18th. So it was retrograde until February 23rd, which was rough. But yeah, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Let's talk about that. There's a lot to unpack with Neptune, and we'll get back to that. But I do want to put a little, bow on what Ophi was saying before we jump ahead. This year we are seeing these resonances, these repeating cycles that took place during the American Revolution, as well as other revolutions, Haitian and French, the Civil War, and World War II in the 40s. And so we're having to grapple with the fact that these divides of humanity, these fights, let's just say Hamilton, Harriet Tubman, and Hitler are kind of
with the side of Abraham
ghosts.
Lincoln.
If you want to do a seance right now, those are the people to call in.
Which is interesting because they did
maybe
do
not
seances.
all three of them, actually. Sorry.
No,
scrap that. You could leave
scrap
Hitler
at least
and
one of them. Yes, but during the 1860s, they did do seances in the White House. Abraham Lincoln's wife was a big seance host. So supposedly that the Lincolns haunt the White House.
Well, this is creepy too. I was reading an article in the Atlantic about Hitler's rise to power, which is eerily resonant to Trump in some ways, except he didn't have the financial privilege. But he was thought of as, there's no way this guy, this little man or this insecure guy could ever come into power. But right before he did, he actually had a seance with a famous German Jewish occultist and astrologer who said he was going to win. And nobody thought he was. And they said he's going to win the election and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. The Soul Group wanted him to, which is, if you look at life from, okay, good and evil is here to force humanity's reckoning and lessons. I don't like to think about tragic events that way, but the reality is over every era, there has been, the same cycle of rising and falling and evolving and going backwards and destruction.
And civilizations rising and falling and disappearing. Yeah. I mean,
so even Hitler had a seance, which is crazy. I mean,
wow.
But, it just, as we go Neptune and Aries, I was wondering when I was reading that, and as I've been tuning into the telepathy tapes also, which are these recordings, documented recordings of nonverbal autistic kids who can communicate telepathically with their parents, with each other, and what they all kind of say, just like Dolores Cannon's, patients who went under hypnosis, they all kind of have the same message of there is this collective consciousness that information comes in. And the part of Dolores Cannon that I was listening to is she was saying these other beings send information. They can't penetrate. They can't come. Not the three waves of volunteers, but these archangels or other beings who work with us from the other side, ascended masters. While they can't come into Earth form, they can send waves of information down, and whoever picks it up is the one who gets to use it. And I was just thinking about how all these Silicon Valley execs and even oligarchs have been using psychedelics. Elon Musk uses ketamine regularly. And when you do use those, your brain relaxes and you do channel messages. They are a seance unto themselves in a way. And I wonder what imprinted information they're picking up and they're able to pull in that maybe wasn't meant necessarily for them, or maybe they're jumping the line and getting these downloads faster than other people. And because they have the resources and the means, they've been able to, build rocket ships, go to outer space, even misuse and misappropriate that the way we did the atom bomb. I know I'm going on and on. Might as well be doing a book report for Dolores Cannon. But in the 40s, she was, one of the messages she received and channeled was that we were not meant to use atomic power the way we did. We got that information too quickly and turned it into the atom bomb and destroyed our fellow humans with it and now use it as a weapon. So are we using space travel and all these other things? So where are these messages floating? It behooves us all, perhaps, as Neptune goes into Aries. It's almost like a subconscious space race. You want to get the information, you got to relax your mind. You got to go inward. You got to hit that delta, that meditative state, with or without ketamine or mushrooms or whatever people use.
Yeah. Please keep Doge out of the 5D, okay? We just don't
Doge is
need.
in the 5D though.
Yeah.
They probably are. They're all up in the 5D. And
Yeah. It's like Hitler at a seance. Like, that information was not going to be used for the good of humanity. And that's what Dolores Cannon talks about in that book. Just atomic and nuclear power were meant for helping to sustain humanity and to do good, not to destroy and bomb and kill and create one of the worst tragedies ever in our history. We don't like to be the astrologer saying, and guess what? That planetary cycle's coming around again, and leave you feeling like, oh, great. Okay, well, might as well just, eat, drink, and make merry because the end of the world is coming. Look, We've thought that many times, even at Y2K, at the turn of the millennium. It is always up to us. This is a test of your spiritual broadcasting system. Like, what we need to do is high vibration people need to be tuning into those messages too and trying to receive and intercept them if we can.
there's this kind of collective confusion right now, like marching and protesting doesn't seem to be working with the current battle plan because Doge is working with data and rockets and algorithms, and Trump is ignoring judges' orders. So the usual methodology, the usual playbook is pretty much farce right now because it's like just being ignored under this autocratic energy. And I don't think there's any end in sight. I think it's like, how do we upgrade the fields that we're playing on, the landscape?
Yeah, well,
And
that's the thing. It's like we don't want to scare people, but we also can't do denial. And we have to look at the fact that the planets are moving into the same signs they were in at very pivotal turning points in history where there was war. War and innovation and financial system changes often, if not always, go hand in hand. Money is needed for wars. So, it's possible that many of these federal cuts are actually a way of gathering resources. I'm just looking back at the prior cycles in history and what happened. I can see some of that. And now that does not have to be like, oh no, I'm scared and I'm going to freeze. But it's true. We are not resilient collectively, at least those of us in the Gen X and beyond. We may be resilient in the workforce and with trauma and with our emotions. But when it comes to, being prepared for things that frankly we thought, humanity isn't going to do that anymore. They don't need to go to those levels. We've progressed so much. We've become so civilized. Like, I never thought I'd see segregation being allowed again. I mean, the kind of things that
it's part of a Steve Bannon playbook. And you want to go, oh, they're just doing shock and awe, but I don't think so. I think there's a larger plan of flooding the zone. But here's the thing. We do have an opportunity to meet it, and it might be a different kind of battle. Let's look at how it's kind of priming us already to get into our subconscious in a new way. Monday, the Sun and Mercury retrograde are meeting up in Aries. So the Sun shining this light into all of those back channel ideas that you might have had. Mercury retrograde is where you want to dig in the archives. Was there wouldn't it be crazy if, and I even think just the fact that we're talking about Dolores Cannon and the telepathy tapes and all these things that might sound far-fetched on the logical playing field, like we need to consider a different way of fighting as well. So Aries is a sign of war, combat, battle strategies. And that's, Steve Bannon, who is a Sagittarius, one of his things that he does do well, even if I think he's a horrible human being. He was talking about Trump in 2028 and how they have a plan for a third term, but he's planning. He's an art of war kind of guy.
Gotta be honest, I hear a lot of people who are part of the more spiritual set say, live in the moment, be in your body, breathe, because we're all trying to bring our nervous systems, back into a regulated state. Or I'm not watching the news anymore. I totally understand why, because we are empathic and sensitive, but it's creating a real dilemma that I think, the 29th degree of any planet's journey has a special name, and it is supposed to be a very, very intensely felt. It's the final degree of a planet's journey through a sign.
Anaretic degree.
The anaretic degree, a little astro jargon for this week too. So we're feeling that. We're feeling that like, how can I protect my nervous system and my peace, but also not just like totally not have a plan, like Tali's saying. Like this, from what I'm hearing, the plan to dismantle the parts of democracy and the Department of Education, that's been going on since the early 20th century, when, religious Christians did not want the Bible taken out of school curriculum. So there has always been this divide. It's just surfacing at a breaking point now with this unique cosmic moment.
And Neptune is at that 29 degrees Pisces this week. Hasn't been there since 1861, and you looked up the date, the Battle of Fort Sumter.
Yeah, the first battle that started the Civil War, April 12th and 13th of 1861, when rebel Confederate breakaway group attacked a U.S. fort in Charleston, Fort Sumter. And it actually fell to their, they won that. It was like the January 6th of the 1800s. So that, and then the next day, April 14th, was when Neptune went from 29 degrees Pisces to 0 degrees Aries. So like, you cannot make this stuff up.
You mentioned January 6th, and there was actually a 29 degree happening then. Mars, which had been in Aries for like this super long time in 2020 because of its retrograde, moved into Taurus, but it was at 29 degrees Aries and hit 0 degrees Taurus while the whole insurrection was happening, while the J6ers were breaking into the Capitol. So, this week is...
Yeah, it's wild. Even on March 29th, which isn't a 29 degree, but that number is showing up. 2 plus 9 is 11. I always do that math in my head. But yeah, we've got the eclipse. So
Aries.
In Aries. It's a very Mercury retrograde podcast because we are going all over the place. But there is a method to all of this cosmic madness that we're talking about. So it's Pisces, it's Aries, it's this flowy Pisces. And, Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac and Aries is the first, which makes it even more momentous that we're feeling this. Neptune is the ruler of Pisces, so it's leaving its home sign where it's most comfortable and moving into, moving out of this spiritual, ephemeral, ethereal sign it's been in since 2012, which has really brought a rise of our spiritual consciousness and awareness. Like, who was going to yoga and Pilates and drinking green juice and, in 2012, only like weird or wealthy people, like all of these things are now normalized for us and just almost basic at this point. So, we see Neptune's journey, but now we have another long one ahead until 2038. So Neptune in Aries is going to imprint our world, and we're gonna get the sneak preview of it. I mean, it's almost like the opening act, like Chapel Roan opening for Olivia Rodrigo with this eclipse on the 29th of in Aries. So, and then the next day Neptune moving into Aries. So Aries again is anger, aggression, war, but also individuality, fighting for your rights, fighting for freedom. Like, you cannot make me. So we're going to see, I think, the good, the bad, and the ugly expression of that highly individualistic warrior sign filling up the skies this week, while Venus leaves Aries and backs into Pisces.
As does Mercury.
And
there's an eclipse in Aries. So, Monday, the Sun and Mercury retrograde go into Aries, kind of review your battle plans. You better learn how to fight. It's really giving us that message. Learn how people effectively fought against autocrats in the past, how we have to do our work. We have to do our studying. Mercury's retrograde in Aries just for a few more days until Saturday. But before that, on Thursday, Venus, the planet of love and harmony and kind of the antidote to war, which has been in Aries, the sign of war, since February, and retrograde in Aries since March 1st. Remains retrograde till April 12th, but it slips back into Pisces. And I think that's one of the soothing salves of this week, because Venus is exalted in Pisces and it loves being there. So there is where you get to slip into art and music and love and romance. Venus is also reappearing as a morning star that day too. So Venus has been invisible since March 22nd. So we haven't been feeling the love. I think that's part of why I've been so stressed too, besides the fact that, the Department of Education is and all the insanity that's going on. But like, I wasn't able to sort of access some of that creative energy, and I had to go deeper. And
we are
Venus
all entitled to that, to a cup of healing / denial from Venus and Pisces and its reappearance. Yeah, when Venus goes dark, it really is like, your favorite talk show host is off the air and you're not soothed anymore.
Yeah, you just don't have you don't have that easy access to harmony that you might, but it is a chance to really wipe the slate clean. I heard of a lot of couples having some arguments or hitting a wall and getting stuck. So Venus reappearing as a morning star while backing into Pisces on Thursday, March 27th. Is a blessing in terms of just being able to access compassion at a deeper level. Now, Venus remains in Pisces all the way until April 30th. So we have a long time to connect to this. We already had this cycle. We already had this at the beginning of the year, early January to the start of February. When people were definitely being compassionate to each other with the LA fires, then just kind of dealing with the shock of the administrative shift. I do have to say, though, while Venus is retrograde until April 12th, don't be so quick to, fall for the illusion of love and harmony, because there might be some people pulling the wool over your eyes, and Venus and Pisces can be kind of gullible. Here's where there's a hiccup, though. Also on Thursday, Black Moon Lilith, the shadow force, the witch wound, the empowered feminine force inside of us all, is changing signs after 9 months since late June of being in Libra, where I think it kind of may have spun up some trad wifery
I was
and
gonna say, is this like when all the resentment that the trad wives like have stuffed down while making chewing gum for their husbands instead of running to the corner store? Like, is this when it all boils over and the hot grit plate goes flying?
it might be, or yeah, just like I feel like Lilith in Libra may have caused a little bit of a complicit energy where people had to deal with the shadow part of themselves that wanted to harmonize. I mean,
Oh my
Gavin
God.
Newsom, the governor of California, who's been anti-Trump, largely had Steve Bannon on his podcast and who was it? Charlie Kirk, too.
Yeah.
Like, they're not just conservative, they're flagrant bigots. Those are not the people you want to normalize. We had Chuck Schumer going against the Democratic Party, doing what he felt was right, but arguably stealing away the party's unified front and ability to negotiate. People just working too hard to be harmonious. It didn't do Kamala, who's a Libra, any good that Lilith was there. But there was
So
a
it really
lot
is that
of denial.
void, yeah, that
Yeah.
shadow expression of what is masquerading as like, let's be fair. Like, no, that's not fair. Like, what are you thinking? You know, you cannot negotiate with a narcissist or a terrorist here. Has anyone successfully negotiated anything since Black Moon Lilith went into Libra? It's just been terrible, from hostage crisis,
Faux
releases to
ceasefires that could never get off the
Gaza. Yeah.
ground. And
Oh my gosh, no. It's just been the worst. Everything has been mishandled and just nothing's working here. So maybe Lilith's departure will help. Maybe the Scorpio energy will, but it can also turn up people's desire and appetite for revenge, which we don't want. Scorpio can be very extreme, so we may see more extreme measures of things happening too when people.
well, there's all these fetal laws. People are trying to like push through bills to give rights to fetuses here. So Scorpio rules reproduction. I think it also rules our sexuality, our sexual identity in ways that we could see more attacks on trans and LGBTQ community overall, like rights, but we could also see a huge pushback as
Yeah.
well. I mean, Lilith, just so you know, the legend of Lilith in Jewish lore was Adam's first wife, and she was asked to submit to him, and she refused and instead chose exile from Eden. And she was also sexually empowered. Instead of giving in to patriarchal domination, she chose to go off on her own to be cast out. In astrology, Lilith represents that part of ourselves that doesn't belong but finds empowerment in our own values and truths. So whatever sign Lilith was in when you were born will show where you have that witch wound, but also that empowered warrior. But where it is every 9 months, funny enough, it changes signs every 9 months, which echoes the birth cycle. So we're giving birth to this new bad bitch inside of us. And now it's in the Scorpio realm for us all. So enough of this, Libra harmonizing. Now it's like the power
People
lines are
pleasing.
drawn. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting because I think in these last 9 months, I've never seen, like, from Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, like, just so many defenders of wrongness from, like, the team you would never expect to be recruiting players. Like, I'm just like, I'm hoping that
women selling out for the patriarchy, basically.
Lilith and Libra has been sellout central for the last 9 months in so many ways.
Scorpio energy, when Jupiter went into Scorpio, we had the whole Me Too movement. The last time Lilith was in Scorpio was the middle of 2016 until middle of February 2017, and that was when Trump came into power, but also the Women's March and our pussy hats. The Women's March on Washington is still one of the largest single-day demonstrations on the Capitol and worldwide in history. So, I don't think we'll be using knitting needles and pink yarn this time, but, Lilith and Scorpio does not mess around. So that gives me a little bit of, something, a thread to hold on to while Venus goes retrograde but comes back as a morning star. It could also wake up that Lilith energy in us. Then, let's get to Saturday, because like we said, this week is jam-packed. We have the new moon in Aries, which is also a solar eclipse, and the third and final solar eclipse, thank God, in this series that began 2 years ago in April of 2023, that has been hitting the Aries and Libra axis, bringing up war and peace. So that also echoes, there's so much of that, like surrender, fight. So this is the final one. Now, the way eclipses work is they're most intense in the beginning. They kind of, drop a bomb, and then we spend a couple years putting the pieces back together. So whatever started for you back in April of 2023 could be coming to some kind of a final flourish, and it most likely has something to do with your own path, your own belief system, maybe how you relate to yourself as an individual versus how you see yourself in relationships. It could be an examination of your attachment issues. You may be ready to let go of something or a relationship or a person that you've moved on from, but haven't totally, or it could be a reconciliation, but
this is a solar eclipse, so it's a new moon.
Yeah.
The one 2 weeks ago was a lunar full moon eclipse, which tend to, eclipse things away, bring endings and transitions. New moons can bring fresh starts. So solar eclipse is a reboot. Now it's an Aries, so it might be like I'm starting over solo after moving on from something, a situation, a job, a partnership. Or it's just I'm starting fresh in this, in the same scenario, but with my Aries confidence and sovereignty and self-advocacy intact and not compromising on that. So eclipses bring surprises. We never know what's going to happen until it actually happens. But this one is also a super moon. And yes, a new moon can be a super moon. That's a little thing that people don't always know, because a super moon isn't about the visibility of the moon. It's that the moon is close to the Earth in measurement, in miles measured. So when it is a full moon, super moon, it appears bigger because it's closer to us. But it really has to do with where it is in the sky and distance. So this is a new super moon. And as astrologers, we do believe you feel a supermoon more impactfully, gravitational forces and all, and an eclipse as well. So yeah, this is not a soft and fluffy and gentle week. We're saying bye to Libra energy. We are seeing Venus and Pisces. That's going to be our aloe vera after the sunburn from Aries.
And Mercury goes retrograde in Pisces.
I keep leaving
the same
Mercury
day.
out.
I know you don't want to think about Mercury retrograde, but the day of that supermoon eclipse, it's kind of doing the funny like Aries Pisces energy dance, because Mercury has been retrograde in Aries since March 15th. But on Saturday, the same day as the solar eclipse in Aries, it also moves back into Pisces, just like Venus.
I'm also like, Venus is in detriment in Aries, so it does not like to be there, but it's exalted in Pisces. So like, phew, we catch a break. But Mercury is in fall in Pisces, so which means it does not like to be in Pisces. So
No,
here we
doesn't.
go, like another kind of switcheroo, like Venus from hard to easy and Mercury from okay to a little bit harder. So I'm not looking forward to being foggy brained from Mercury and Pisces. But, we'll survive. We'll survive.
I know. Again, that could be really good for doing some subconscious tapping and getting
That's
into
true.
that. Mercury will be back in Aries on April 16th. It turns direct on the 7th and then stays in Pisces till
And
April
with
16th.
Mercury and Venus and Pisces, like definitely to what you're saying, like work on just priming your subconscious and your spiritual field. Like listen to music, audiobooks, do some dancing, do more right-brained kind of things. I have a watercolor book that I've been waiting to use. I think that's probably how I'm going to use Mercury and Pisces as well. It is a time that you definitely want to do some mental and emotional self-soothing, bonding, tending, and befriending, because while also making your plans.
Spring cleaning, too. I mean, I was listening to Dolores Cannon while wiping baseboards, which I personally find soothing. Those kinds of we all have our activities that we consider soothing, but like what is going to get you into that Kairos time flow state where you can capture and pick up the signals? If these psychic signals in the collective consciousness are always there and accessible, how do we think of ourselves as, satellite dishes that can tune in and capture the frequencies? It's not fair that Starlink gets all of those.
That brings us to the next day of Neptune and Aries, because again, Neptune is everything that Tali just described. It's the ruler of Pisces. It's all that channeling energy, but Aries is very physical and warrior-like. So I think we're also going to see for the rest of the year, and into the 2030s, we're going to be seeing a move toward pulling our heads out of the sand and like figuring out how to regulate our nervous systems, but also be ready, feel strong, feel powerful, feel ready to advocate for ourselves, feel ready to stand up for ourselves. There's been a lot of caving to, the administration. People have been overwhelmed and just like, oh God, do I just have to accept this one more bit of bad news that I'm just being screwed over with? Like, that is about to, I believe, shift from Lilith and Scorpio to Neptune and Aries. It's enough with the signs and the old ways of protesting. No shade to those because they were very powerful, but we've got to stop referencing, the 1960s picket lines and picket signs only. We need to find, maybe the Civil War that's happening is going to be fought on a higher dimensional frequency. Maybe it has to be armoring up spiritually as well. And I think Neptune and Aries is going to start to show us, just remember, like, again, 2012, Neptune and Pisces, we were not talking about stuff like that. If you said 5D to someone, they'd be like, what are you talking about? Is that like,
if you suggested they do ayahuasca, they would be like, are you insane?
if they even,
I knew one person who did it before, and she told, I was like, what, you are, but she's like way out there, like,
right now you could go on a corporate retreat to do it.
I do want to say Neptune rules the unseen and the invisible. And I saw someone on Instagram talking about the silent revolution. Don't let the opponent see what you're up to. You don't have to make it obvious. Just take yourself away. Stop spending money with them.
Mm-hmm.
Stop shopping at all these places that are supporting things that you don't agree with. It might be a little inconvenient, but also, like, when you think about it, like, secret warfare is happening with bots, with algorithms, with data. We also have to move into this Pluto and Aquarius time. We have to learn how to use AI and protect our data and,
I was watching this lawyer who was talking about, like, if you're not a U.S. citizen and you're traveling, like, leave your regular phone at home. he had a whole list of like sign out of every app, turn off your locate, make a really hard password, because if they don't ask for the password, then I mean, it was just like, I was like, I can't believe I'm actually listening to someone have to give those instructions. Yeah, if we haven't convinced you that this is a wild ride of a week, and also really the popping of the cork on a very new long cycle, which feels really, yeah, I can't say that I'm like woohoo about it. And it's more, this year has already just been so much. It's like, yeah, I can admit, I'm like, it's another new phase. Like, I don't even
And there's
know.
more to come. More to come.
I need to really adopt a growth mindset, which I'm usually encouraging of around Neptune. It's like, I just got comfortable with Neptune and Pisces, even though it's been there since 2012. Like, thinking about being at the beginning of a cycle that goes until 2038, that included the Civil War, but also the end of slavery and a lot of very positive things as well. But thinking about that I can't say that it's giving me the warm fuzzies about 2025, which we named the year of the divine pendulum.
This is not a warm, fuzzy year.
It's a 9-year, which is the end of a numerology cycle, which we have been well taught by our numerologist, Felicia Bender, is a transitional year. It's a year of the snake, which is also very kind of things move slowly, and it may look like nothing's happening, but it actually is. So I'm having to keep reminding myself of that, especially after the fast-paced, action-packed, exciting dragon year that was 2024. It was an 8-year. It was always, everything felt powerful and dynamic, even if it didn't go
things
our
are
way.
Moving fast and getting broken, but
not in the right way.
Yeah,
everything is happening in this veiled snake, like sneaky, slithery kind of way, which is also what's making, I think, hard for people to just relax and make that plan, because we can't get a sense of what is really happening, what isn't. Can a signed executive order mean that this can actually happen, or can't it? Like, everything that we have been told is a certain way. Someone's just going like, well, no, I'm not going to do it that way, so maybe it isn't. And then there's a fight, and there's a this, and it's like there's a constitutional crisis of the day. It's like, yeah, I mean, if anything, I think like a snake, we may be shedding our more delicate skin and growing a tougher, more resilient one. And if we haven't yet, I think Neptune and Aries and Lilith and Scorpio are definitely going to bring us that. So
yeah, the 29 degrees of Neptune this week until Sunday may make you feel like you're in mourning a little. Democracy as we know it, the United States as we've known it, it is going through a change, and the world order is reshuffling as well. And we don't know where it's all going to land.
You heard it here, though. We're in the stew. We're in it. I was listening to, I think we've mentioned David Guillaume, who is a Kabbalah teacher. He was my Kabbalah teacher when I took a class, because as a Sag, I'll dabble in any metaphysical thing that clearly from Dolores Cannon to Kabbalah. But he was talking on his podcast about how the final 2% of anything is where all the hardest stuff happens, all the challenges, all the things. So like maybe you felt like, I'm cruising and I'm almost at the finish line. And then the finish line, which might be in sight, feels like you're walking through cement to get to it. So I think, yeah, I'm experiencing some of that. I don't know what finish line we're at except for Neptune, but like whatever spiritual finish line or transition corridor we're going through, like it doesn't have to be hard, but maybe there will be some hard parts, and we just have to keep going.
I think the evolved side of Pluto and Aquarius, which does want a world where there's freedom as an ideal and democratic ideals, and
it's a fight. It's a fight for that. We are definitely going to have to fight for what has become clear So we have to fight for democracy. And that is something that I've taken for granted my entire life. If I'm being honest, I was like, someone is elected to do that, or I will, but, only beyond a certain point. Like, I never thought that it would be threatened at the level that it is right now. And so, like I said earlier, I confess to not feeling prepared. And I know we're about to go into learning what it's going to take to prepare ourselves to defend something that, we have all spiritually fought for as well, like humanity's progress. Whatever, if we need another wave of volunteers.
I was thinking that. I'm like, I think a fourth wave might be coming in. I do feel like Generation Alpha and Gen Z have this consciousness and this fluidity that really defies anything we've had in the past.
People turning 18, 19 are now in their North Node return and have Pisces North Nodes. So they are probably emerging into that spiritual, Virgo South Node, the balance of spirituality and sensibility. So now it's their time to kind of step into leadership too. So
and I have my eye on some, with this year, like some Aries, like David Hogg and Jasmine Crockett with Neptune going into Aries. Also Cancer, Elizabeth Warren, don't sleep on her. I know Bernie Sanders.
Claudia Scheinbaum, she's Cancer.
I know. So there are leaders here who may actually be activated as well by Neptune and Aries. So
Tim Walz is an Aries, and
true.
he's been doing a lot of talks lately too, I've noticed. So so he's kind of back on the scene.
This eclipse on Saturday could truly also bring a new wave of that.
Our mission collectively, which is the last thing I'll say, is to figure out how to unplug from the chaos machine, the zone flooding, without going into denial, without dropping out. How to, maybe there's like a vibration. If you think about a radio dial, don't turn the radio off, but go to the classical music station instead of like the one that's blaring at you that you can't sleep through. How do we find that? Whatever the energetic version of a calming frequency is for you, where you're still engaged, but restoring yourself instead of depleting and draining yourself.
Calm, assertive, the dog whisperer's advice for training dogs is Neptune and Aries right there. So
let's see how that all plays out. So this podcast's flow was almost like a metaphor for what the planets are like this week ahead. So hang in
brought
there.
To you by Mercury Retrograde.
So no matter what happens, we will move through this together. And, we're going to keep watching the stars and letting you know what they're doing so that you can be prepared, not scared. We'll make that plan. It is revealing itself to us, even if we don't realize it. So we'll see you on the other side of Neptune's move into Aries with lots more to share about next week.
Should be fascinating. See you next week, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to AstroTwins Radio. If today's episode gave you an aha moment, we'd be over the moon if you left us a 5-star review. It helps fellow astrology lovers find us. And make sure to hit subscribe and follow us on iTunes and Spotify so you never miss an episode. Want the full visual experience? You can also watch the video version on our YouTube at AstroTwins-TV. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at AstroTwins and head over to astrostyle.com to read your free daily, weekly, and monthly horoscope that we write for you with love. Until next time, move with intention and let the universe meet you there.